Welcome back to Hoop City with Paul Sir. I am pleased to be joined by Pat Boylan again from the Indiana Pacers, as we all know him, but now his other gig, which is as the voice of the Indiana Fever, who are about to start their new season today, actually. And Pat, thanks so much for making some time to speak with us.
Of course. Good to be with you and excited to tip off what should be a historic 2026 WNBA season here today for the Fever.
Well, let's talk about that historic, because that's not just a platitude that you're throwing out that doesn't have very real content attached to it. It was such a colorful off season. That's one descriptor I think I could use. But what a season of controversy, of upset, of all kinds of discussions going on a variety of levels. But it ended up with a very progressive contract for the players. They've seen their compensation go up dramatically. And what do you feel like the vibe is, not just within the Fever organization, Pat, but also within the league in general?
Well, as it relates to the contracts, first of all, it's kind of a stunning change, really, because I'm not sure. Maybe you could find another example going way back into the history of all the sports leagues. Usually when you say ever and you talk about sports, you can find a comparison. But you've got a scenario where the players in the 2026 WNBA season that are on minimum contracts are making more money than Supermax players were just last season. So the bottom of the roster is now making more money than the top of the roster less than 365 days ago. And the top of the roster is going from making less than 300,000 US, of course, dollars to as much as 1.4 million. I saw a remarkable nugget that Kelsey Mitchell, who signed for the Supermax with the Fever at $1.4 million this year, is going to make more this season than her previous 8 years in the WNBA combined. So it is an absolutely stunning jump in terms of pay, first and foremost. I think they took a lot of steps in the right direction, including developmental contracts. So this is something that the players have been clamoring for quite some time. For so long, you talked about the WNBA being a league of 144, 12 teams, 12 roster spots. But we're seeing expansion, of course, and into Canada. And we're also seeing roster expansion. So now you're at 15 teams, and teams can keep up to 14 players. I'm not a math wizard. I don't have my calculator in front of me. I'm not sure exactly what that number looks like, but it's more than 144. So that's good, too. And, going into this year, the spotlight is always, as has been since 2024 when the Fever drafted Caitlin Clark, the spotlight is massively on the state of Indiana, the city of Indianapolis, and this franchise. And when you consider the fan base here, the local fan base especially, when you're talking about the Fever, you're almost talking to two different subsets of people. You're talking about the people in Indianapolis and the people in the state of Indiana that are fans of their local team, as anybody would. But the Fever had become such a national brand that there's also fans all over the country and all over the globe. It's really a global brand. So if you just look here locally of the fans that would probably also call themselves Pacers fans, and you think about what the last however many months have looked like. I was just adding this up yesterday. It was kind of depressing. The Pacers and Fever have played a combined 121 games without Tyrese Halliburton or Caitlin Clark taking the floor. Those are our city's two biggest stars. So to have that streak ending here on Saturday is one that fans in this area are thrilled, of course, to be seeing. And then nationally, Caitlin just has such a massive fan base that I think you felt this anticipation build up. And in fact, worry is too strong, but I am a little bit concerned of the fact that this feels like opening day feels like a playoff game. It always has so much attention anyway, the first game in any sports league. But Caitlin Clark has not played since early mid-July, and it's been almost 10 months since she's taken the floor. And if things go really well, it'll be great. If you don't look great on opening day, plenty of good teams don't look great. This is just the first iteration of 44 of these. There probably needs to be a realization that no team is at their best here in game number one. But the anticipation level is kind of hard to describe just because it's been so long since we have seen those signature Caitlin Clark moments. And hopefully Saturday, from a Fever broadcaster perspective, goes well. And if it doesn't, I'm going to be quickly counting the days until game number 2 on May 13th, because I'm sure there will be plenty of rational discourse going on in those 4 days. So excited very much to get the season tipped off and underway. And, I'm biased. I'm a biased guest and I'm a glass half full guest, but I just have this sneaky feeling that this season is going to go well. If you're a believer in karma, it kind of feels like things are going to go maybe swing the other direction in a good way here for the Fever. And they clearly need Caitlin Clark healthy. She'll be out there game number 1 and hopefully for all 44 plus playoffs.
Pat, there have been some naysayers about the WNBA, even as much about the WNBA agreement. And I think it was about 10 days ago, I saw one of the sports pundits in the country talking about the difficulty that Indiana was having in selling out the arena because of the ticket prices, which they claimed were apparently much higher than they were last year. Is that true, or is it a sellout? Certainly the excitement and the vibe is there, but are the people going to fill the stadium as well?
I don't know exactly what the ticket numbers look like, to be honest with you. But we are absolutely expecting a sellout here on Saturday. I did see one post, and I'm not sure if this is what you're referencing or if it was somewhere else. I saw it like a few weeks ago where somebody said, look at all the open seats at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, but when you go on Ticketmaster, the default setting is to show resale tickets as well. So and if you take the resale tab off, then there weren't many seats left. In fact, I checked it yesterday and it wasn't yet a sellout, but the seats that were available were all in the upper corners of the balcony. And if you click resale, anybody can resell their tickets. That doesn't mean that there won't be people in those seats. So I think anticipation level is close to an all-time high. And, there's a marketing side of things. It's frankly way over my head. I'm already dissing my own math abilities here twice in the first 5 minutes. I'm not sure what that says about me, but I don't understand.
You'll have to get in touch with your elementary school math teacher, Pat.
I'm really good with calculators if I've got one in front of me, and that's about it. But, I don't understand. There's, of course, a business side to all of this. And frankly, for many, many years, not to go down this rabbit hole too far, but for many, many years, the Simons, who are wonderful people and dedicated and passionate owners, took a loss on the Fever for many, many, many years, but because they, A, believed in the product, and B, believed that maybe one day something like this could happen. I don't think anybody imagined this in their wildest dreams. So I will tell you, they asked me, for example, right when I started not when I started, but when Caitlin Clark got here, I should say, if I was okay moving from my broadcast position from the floor to the club level. And I said, first of all, I can't even believe you're asking me this and not just doing it, but I appreciate the thought. And B, absolutely, please do it. If you can sell these 4 seats at a premium, you guys, nobody has been more bought into the WNBA over the last 2 decades than the Simon family. So, I'm sure there is kind of a push and a pull with the levers on exactly how to price things the right way from a business standpoint, but also to be accessible to the fans. But assuming your audience here will be tuning in the not too distant future to our game, you're going to see a full building on Saturday. That's for sure.
I'm talking to Pat Boylan, the voice of the Indiana Fever. They get started this afternoon against Dallas. Now, this is an interesting matchup. You talk about Caitlin's coming back. Of course, everybody is excited. In fact, everybody who has any kind of knowledge about the basketball world in general is familiar with the fact that Caitlin Clark missed a great deal of the season last year. There was all the controversy swirling around at a variety of levels about Caitlin and her impact on the league, some of the controversy around players and how they responded to Caitlin's impact on the league. But now we're getting back to basketball. Let's talk about this matchup between Dallas and Indiana. And of course, 2 Midwestern girls, Caitlin Clark from Iowa and Paige Beckers from Hopkins, Minnesota. they're the stars of their teams, and in many respects, two of the big stars in the league itself. What do you think what do you look for this matchup in the game?
First of all, there are just so many aspects of a matchup like this that I love. One of those being, we know that Caitlin Clark is the megastar and the major needle mover. I've had this conversation on your show before. I don't need to rehash it in detail. The WNBA for a long time has seen strong and steady growth year over year. I can give you plenty of examples of how the league has grown from my first year in 2015 to 2023. But Caitlin Clark's emergence has turbocharged, and the league is seeing growth that has been pushed decades forward, in my opinion, solely from the emergence of Caitlin Clark. But for the league's health and continued growth, it cannot be all on her shoulders. And don't get me wrong, there are plenty of stars. I mean, Asia Wilson might go down as the best player in the history of the WNBA when she retires. Brianna Stewart is a wonderful talent for the New York Liberty. Sabrina Ionescu has a lot of those talents and capabilities that Caitlin Clark has. But Caitlin Clark is the big needle mover, and as the sport continues to grow, I don't know if this is an apples to apples comparison, but you look at the NBA and you think about the fact that, the NBA has a almost 50-year head start on the WNBA. And when did the NBA really start to take off? In the 80s with Magic and Bird. And of course, here locally, Larry Bird means a whole lot to people here. He's from Indiana, and that really turbocharged the NBA into the 90s and Michael Jordan. We know the story. There needs to be more household name stars in this league. And in my opinion, the most popular player in the WNBA is undoubtedly Caitlin Clark. I think the second most popular player in the WNBA is Paige Beckers. And if there was an Aces fan listening to this, they might take offense to that. I mean none of it. Again, I just said I think Asia Wilson will probably go down as the greatest WNBA player of all time, and she has a tremendous fan base. But we're talking, in my opinion, about another tier that is starting to be reached in the WNBA, which is household names coming out of college with major fan bases. Beckers is not at Clark's level, but I think it's at a level that in the non-Caitlin Clark world, we are seeing for the first time. So that's really exciting to me. I'm hopeful that you're going to have 15 years of Caitlin Clark and Paige Beckers going back and forth and each winning multiple championships and multiple MVP awards. And I think we have more coming down the pike. I think Juju Watkins is going to be another great example of that. So as it relates to the game here on Saturday, I almost think it's a perfect opener, because my hope is that it's a small sample and a microcosm of what's going to be a much larger storyline, which is going to continue to lift the WNBA up, of these two mega stars. And by the way, you're talking about the last 4 number 1 overall picks that are going to hit the floor on Saturday, including Aaliyah Boston, who's a great young center, 3-time All-Star in her 3 years, and AZ Fudd, who had a tremendous standout year at UConn as well. So you're going to see some of the top young talent in this league. Clark and Beckers are the headliners, but Boston and Fudd, and for Indiana, Kelsey Mitchell, and for Dallas, Arike Agumbawala. I mean, there's a ton of talent on the floor here tomorrow, and I think it's a great way to get this game and to get this season started. And if you're Indiana and you have contention aspirations, which they absolutely should, it's just one of 44, but I think Dallas is going to be a good team. So I think it's a really good early test for the Fever.
I get goosebumps just listening to you describe it like that, Pat, and it makes me even more excited to watch the game tomorrow, because you've outlined and you've showcased exactly what's going on in the league so very well. You mentioned Bird and Magic. You add, of course, Michael Jordan into the mix, but it transcends just NBA basketball, as we know. You look at the impact of Tiger Woods on golf. It's inexplicable. There's a lot of other great golfers. There's a lot of other great personalities, but once in a while, for a whole bunch of reasons, and a lot of them are hard to quantify, somebody just is it and is transformational. And that has been Caitlin Clark. But now start adding the improving breadth of talent that's coming into your league, the star quality of certain players, as you mentioned correctly with Paige. Aaliyah is a charming individual, very, very well spoken when she does broadcasting. Yeah. She does an extremely good job. So yeah, you've laid the table really nicely. My final question, because I know I'm one of about 100 people lined up to talk to you, but my final question for you today is that if you had one hoped for outcome for this entire WNBA season for the Indiana Fever, other than the obvious one, which would be to win a championship, what would that outcome be, Pat?
Well, I'll answer it from the Indiana Fever, and then I'll answer it at a more macro view league-wide. From a Fever perspective, I think you're hoping to see the obvious is health. This team just needs Caitlin Clark on the floor. What they accomplished last year was remarkable. I mean, for fans who need a refresher, they were in the decisive Game 5 and in overtime of the decisive Game 5 without Caitlin Clark, and Kelsey Mitchell went down mid-game. They're in overtime away from being in the WNBA Finals despite all of that. So this year, to me, for the Fever, I am hoping the storyline becomes as impressive as last year was, a little bit less the little engine that could, if you will, and a little less of look at this ragtag group putting it all together and overachieving. And it becomes more of look at this contender playing like a contender. That's the storyline change that I hope we're experiencing this year. And there's going to need to be some luck from the injury perspective to get there. But I'm exceedingly confident that if Caitlin Clark, Kelsey Mitchell, and Aaliyah Boston are afforded relatively good health this year, that the Fever will at bare minimum be contenders. And I think they're absolutely in a short list of teams that if things go right can win a championship this year. So that's the storyline, I hope we're experiencing. If that means the Fever are in the finals, winning of course I want them to win the championship, but I hope they start to morph from a couple of years ago, oh my gosh, Caitlin Clark's in the WNBA, and oh cool, they made the playoffs, to last year, oh look at this just incredible run despite everybody hurt. This year, it's time to be, in my opinion, contenders, and it's time to push for a championship. And that, of course, you need many extenuating circumstances to go your way to get there. But at bare minimum, I hope that is the storyline that we're talking about throughout the year, including on your show. League-wide, there's kind of a it's like going up to the line without stepping over it, because in many ways the attention on the WNBA that, of course, Caitlin Clark and her fans have brought, but from numerous other players too, has created at times chaos as it relates to just the general discourse of the league. I hope we are not in situations where that line is being crossed quite as much as it has been in the past. But I hope we're tiptoeing up to it, because the fact that you're on mainstream sports talk shows and the fact that you're in the sports cultural zeitgeist is extremely important and vitally important to any successful and growing league. If all of the players smile and put their thumbs up and play nice, and that's not necessarily what people want to see either. So there's kind of a balance there. Like, there need to be rivalries. There need to be, controversial moments. There are in the NBA every single day. And I think we need to look at those when they happen in the WNBA as fierce competitors going against each other, but without those moments that cross the line. If somebody body checks Caitlin Clark to the floor, then they need to get a flagrant 2 and be ejected, because it's very simple. That's what the rule book says, and we can't miss those opportunities to get it right when they do happen, because then they devolve into the discourse that is not healthy for the league. So I hope there are a lot of talking points around the WNBA, and they don't always have to be, everything is cheery and grand, but I sincerely hope that we're not discussing aspects that are detrimental to the league, and I hope that does not become one of the major storylines this season. I'm hopeful for a super competitive year. Expansion has has happened. We're up to 15 teams. And as we talked about earlier, the star power in the league has never been better. There's going to be rivalries. There's going to be fierceness. And, I'm really geared up. I think this 2026 season for both the Fever and the WNBA has one that historians might look back at 50 years and maybe put, a push pin into 2026 because of what it meant for the future of the league. And hopefully, as a biased broadcaster here from Indiana, the Fever are a big part in why that is the case.
Well, they certainly are coming out of the gate, and I'm sure they will be as the season goes on, Pat. And just one quick comment I would make on the point that you correctly made is it appeared to me that the WNBA probably wasn't ready for prime time with the deluge of attention that was all of a sudden cast upon the league. And it's all part of the growth process. And like you said, you don't want it to become sanitary. You want it to become real, but you want it to become less petty. And I think we're on the verge of that. So it should be an exciting year. And speaking of using the word exciting, I hope today is as exciting as it can be for the great fans in Indiana and for you as the broadcaster. And I look forward, Pat, to when I can have you back on the show again. Thanks so much for making time at this very busy time for you.
Appreciate that very much. There's something special about opening day in any sport, opening night in any sport. And here we are, and here's to an exciting year ahead, both hopefully for our franchise and for Caitlin Clark, but for the league as a whole.
Pat Boylan, voice of the Indiana Fever, joining us here on Hoop City with Paul Sir. We'll be right back after these messages.